our guest is one of the greatest managers, bookers, promoters in wrestling history, Mr. Jim Cornette. How you doing tonight, buddy?
Well, that was better than the first time you tried to introduce me.
You're
See, I
breaking
just
the
busted
fourth
you there.
wall.
This was take two, but I'm doing excellent. I'm doing better than you guys. I thought the weather was bad here, but you're in Philly and New York, and it sucks everywhere. It's a sucky winter.
That's not very nice. You're breaking the fourth wall. You got me all disheveled now. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Whatever, I'm done here. Okay, let's get ready to it. Mr. Cornette, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate your time. Listen, you mentioned it earlier. You're going to the United Kingdom. You've got a spoken word tour. Very cool, very interesting. I was reading up on this. Please talk to me. We got a lot of fans in the UK, in Europe, that would love to come out and see you. So please tell us what this is about. What your goal is of going over to the UK, and what you're going to do while you're over there.
Well, my biggest goal is to take a plane for the first time in 10 years and not crash, and then get back doing the same thing. That's my biggest goal. After that, we're going to have a ball. Alex Shane at WrestleTalk TV and James Dixon at historyofwrestling.info. I used to say .com, but I was corrected. They're my promoters, and of course, Kenny McIntosh with Inside the Ropes there in Glasgow, Scotland. They are, we're really excited about the projects. I was talking to Mick Foley back in December. He came to Louisville and did a show at the Comedy Caravan. And he said, I don't really do stand-up. So, even though he does comedy clubs, it's not a stand-up, although it is hilariously funny. And, spoken word sounds like you're going to recite poetry. So we have come up with the idea to just call it a one-man show, because that's pretty safe. There's one man, he's doing a show, and that's pretty much all you're nailed down to, because it's a free-form kind of thing for the people who listen to my podcast on MLW Radio, the Jim Cornette Experience, for people that have come to see my Q&As in Charlotte at the Wrestling Fan Fest there every August, and different places. They kind of got a little bit of the flavor, but nothing is prepared and nothing's off limits, and there's no holes barred. I take questions, I give answers. Sometimes I ask questions and they give me answers. And we're going to have I think a great time, especially because, like you said, there are so many fans over in the UK, knowledgeable and dedicated wrestling fans. And that's a big part of my Twitter following at the Jim Cornette, for those so inclined. So we're going to have more of what you hear and what you read. You're going to be able to see it in person.
Yeah, in your one-man show, you're obviously not going to have any shortage of things to talk about because, as Donnie said before, you've promoted and booked and managed and commentated, done pretty much everything in between in professional wrestling. And I don't know if you had a preference between any of those roles, but looking back, if you could have only performed in one of those roles over the course of your career, I was wondering what one would you have chosen?
Oh gosh, that's difficult. I mean, my first love obviously was being a manager, and with the Midnight Express, it was so easy because all I had to do was say, "Hey, we're the greatest tag team in wrestling," and they proved it. But then I had a second career when I got into booking and matchmaking and promoting, and then I had actually a third career as a television announcer, which I very much enjoyed as the lead announcer for OVW for so many years. So managing's my first love, but at the same time, I haven't missed for the last 15 or 20 years or so, not getting beat up and thrown around. My body still feels what I went through, especially in this weather, enough without having done that at an advanced age. So, managing was my first love, but I loved everything that I was doing when I was doing it.
Okay, let's talk. You know what? You mentioned the Midnight Express, one of my favorite tag teams of all time, and I mean that. I'm not going to stutter over my words. I mean that. Just talk about, I know you had some great stories, a long history with those guys, one of the greatest tag teams of all time. Any great stories that you'd like to share with the fans, maybe that are younger, that didn't get a chance to see them wrestle in their prime?
Oh, my God. Well, I suggest run screaming like your head is on fire toward your computer and look them up on YouTube, because if you're a wrestling fan and you have not seen the Midnight Express wrestle, then you can't really call yourself a wrestling fan. And, there were so many great times that we had. We were on the road together, 7 days a week, month in, year out, together with each other more than we were our families. And I go into great detail in my book, which I'm sure you have read, The Midnight Express and Jim Cornette 25th Anniversary Scrapbook, that is available as we speak at jimcornette.com. As going back through all the old records, I even reminded myself of some things that I'd forgotten. But it was a great time, wrestling with those guys, traveling with those guys, doing the TV shows, and having some classic matches that people, thankfully still remember to this day.
And any one match in particular you would recommend to a fan?
Gosh, there were so many. Anything with the Rock and Roll Express, especially either from Louisiana or obviously from Charlotte, from Jim Crockett Promotions. The most famous match we had was probably our worst match from a match standpoint, the scaffold match with the Road Warriors. Not a lot you could do up there. It was not Midnight Express quality, but more people saw that than probably anything else we ever did, especially me coming off the scaffold. I told Mick until he had Undertaker beel him off the top of the Hell in a Cell, Jim Cornette, I had the record for most replayed bump on television in the history of wrestling. And not by design, believe me, but, a lot of people saw it.
BG.
Yeah, Jim, recently I've been watching a lot of old 1997, 1998 WWF shows, and some of the most entertaining parts was your shoot promos, if you will, on the state of professional wrestling. I was wondering if these were your ideas to do these segments, and why did they stop?
Well, they were my idea, and they stopped because they were my idea. No. What happened was, back when nobody was on the internet, the WWF.com in its inception had an audio show called Bite This, BYTE. See what they did there. And Kevin Kelly was the host, and he's called me and asked me if I wanted to do a phone interview one day. And that was at the time where the NWO guys and Hall and Nash had done the parody where they made fun of Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, etc. And so I cut a promo basically because, literally, we probably had 300 people listening in the world to this thing. So we didn't need to clear it with the office because nobody knew what we were doing. Nobody listened to the thing. So I just said what I thought. Well, then the next week, I get a call from the office saying that Vince wants to know what I said. And I'm like, why? Is he mad? No, we've had more feedback from your appearance on the program than the feedback from all the other programs we have done to date put together. And he wants you to do it on Raw. Ooh. And so I actually had to write down what I'd basically said and give it to a lawyer, one of the WWF attorneys, so that they could make sure they couldn't sue us for libel or whatever. And he said, no, this is all opinion. And, your statement, blah, 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 you can say it. So that was the only time I ever wrote anything down and put it on a teleprompter. I wrote it because it was what I'd said originally, but then the lawyer had cleared it. And I was afraid I'd get into the passion of the moment and go too far and get us sued. So I wrote what I said, then I read what I wrote on the promo. And that continued a couple of times because people seemed to enjoy it. It was actually legitimate commentary on a wrestling program. Imagine that. But then it got to the point where, people were questioning, including me, why are they allowing me to knock the company? Well, I got to knock the WWF because then, if I knock the WWF for purse snatching, then I can knock the WCW for rape and arson. But you gotta be fair about this stuff. And, it wasn't really selling any tickets. It was causing some talk, but that's when they got started suggesting things that I could talk about, which I didn't necessarily believe in, and or it would not have been good for them if I had talked about those things because they couldn't come out looking very well. So I kind of just hid over in the corner until the idea slipped their mind. So it was something I did by accident. They put it on the air. It couldn't last that way because I was being way too honest for wrestling. And I quickly got out of it before, anybody noticed.
Like Chiari.
Yeah, Jim, you're obviously very well known for your time in WWF, but your promotion, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, somewhat of a hidden gem since it was a southern territory during a time when professional wrestling was kind of going in a different direction. And a lot of current fans, I think, may not be familiar with it. So in order to give those fans something that they can maybe seek out or learn a little bit more about with regards to Smoky Mountain, I was wondering if you could discuss a match or a show, a gimmick, an angle, whatever it may be, something that you're most proud of from Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Well, and, actually a younger audience has been exposed. WWE.com just did a huge piece last month on Smoky Mountain and interviewed a lot of the stars. And my favorite Smoky Mountain Wrestling show of all time was the August 1994 Night of Legends event at the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. I'd started Smoky Mountain because obviously Tennessee territorial wrestling was my first love. That's what I grew up on, watching the Memphis territory here in Louisville. And, at the time we were so unhappy at WCW. It was being so mismanaged. Finally, I left at the end of 1990 and said, wrestling is – the WWF product is increasingly silly. WCW is horribly mismanaged, and all the rest of the territories except for Memphis were falling by the wayside. But I thought if we could get TV in this the mountainous area of East Tennessee and Western Virginia and West Virginia, great wrestling fans, some great wrestling towns, not expensive to run, that we'd take a shot at it. And we did, and we started on the air in Knoxville in February of 1992 with our television program. Smoky Mountain Wrestling went on the air in Knoxville in February of 1992, and we steadily grew. And, in the Knoxville market. And finally, in August of 94, I had the idea to do the Night of the Legends event at the Civic Coliseum that brought back all of the legends of Tennessee wrestling, East Tennessee, like Ron and Don Wright, Don and Al Green. Les Thatcher hosted it. And also put together a tremendous wrestling card, which the main event had Road Warrior Hawk and the Funk Brothers and obviously Bullet Bob Armstrong. And there was just a great card up and down. Terry Gordy was on the card. Tremendous talent, and we ended up selling out the Knoxville Coliseum, doing 5,000 people. We paid about $40,000, and that was my favorite night. Not only did I get a chance to honor some of my childhood heroes, but it was the biggest house that we had done to date at that time in Smoky Mountain, and it showed that there was a market there for the wrestling fans that wanted to see good quality wrestling. It didn't matter whether it was national television or regional television. And then, unfortunately, and then we topped it the following year with the Super Bowl of Wrestling show, where we had champions from 5 different organizations on the card, including the WWF Intercontinental title, Shawn Michaels and Buddy Landel. And we did just a little bit better that year. But unfortunately, with Smoky Mountain, we weren't able to get into enough TV markets. We got too big to be small, but we were still too small to be big. We couldn't get the other TV markets we wanted, like Greenville, South Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, Lexington, Kentucky, to augment the core territory that we had, and we couldn't keep a full crew running off of 3 major television stations. So that was the wrestling recession. Even Vince McMahon lost $6 million in 1995.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about. During that time of wrestling, you started a wrestling company, and it was the gem of a period. It was a down period, and WCW wasn't that great, and WWF wasn't that great. We leaned on Smoky Mountain. We would get tapes. I remember getting tapes. They were trading posts where you would just get Smoky Mountain tapes. Kids are like, what the hell's a tape? I don't know what the hell he's talking about. No.
Actually, we did quite a brisk business with our merchandise business, with selling monthly subscriptions to the TV show on tape for people outside our area.
Yeah, and we like I said, it was something you had to go out and get because of the products that you had in the Northeast. We didn't have ECW yet, and we did, but it just wasn't. It wasn't Extreme Championship Wrestling. It was Eastern Championship. It wasn't good yet. We had
Duke the Dumpster Droese.
Yeah, that's what we had. Don't laugh, dude. But
Duke's a very good friend of mine. Now, what do you mean?
Yeah, come on, Mike Chiari. Listen, no, but my question is, during it's such a tough time in wrestling. The trials and successes. Talk to us about what it was like during the process of the building of Smoky Mountain, and then during its decline.
Oh my God, it was, I would never, people say, would you do it again? No, I would never do it again. It was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of my life for almost 5 years. And the stress was incredible. And I'm surprised I didn't have a stroke or go to prison. I almost did both on a couple of occasions. But at the same time, I wouldn't trade what we did for the world. And there wasn't really a decline as much as we, obviously being backed by Rick Rubin, an eccentric, musical genius and record producer with a lot of money, but it wasn't like he was going to back up the Brinks truck. The idea was that he would get us started and that we would become self-sufficient. As long as we could break even, then whatever, we'd do anything we want. And we steadily grew, and we closed that gap. But finally, it was a combination of not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. We had some international TV deals that we thought would help us prosper, and that fell through. And we were trying to get a couple of more TV markets, and that fell through. And at the time, believe it or not, people snicker now when I say this, but we were like literally $10,000 a month from being self-sufficient. And that's catering now, for wrestling promotions. But at the time, that was a lot of money, and I didn't want to get in a position, because when we started Smoky Mountain in 1992, all of us involved pretty much said, wrestling is as bad as it's ever been. It can't get any worse. Au contraire, it could get a lot worse, and it did. And, you know, we were out drawing WCW's house shows. Man, still not making any money. So you can see where they were at.